I'm Ashokkumar Mistry. I'm an artist based in Leicester and also a member of the Onyx collective. I'm a brown male with grey hair. I've been invited by Disability Arts Online to do a content takeover for the month of November. This content takeover will explore art from the perspective of global majority disabled artists. I hope it is as enjoyable for you to watch and listen to the artists as it has been for me to talk to them.
My name is Roo Dhissou. I am a brown woman with glasses and red lipstick, short black bobbed hair, and a leopard print top.
Today we're joined by Roo Dhissou, a fantastic artist from the West Midlands, and Roo's going to talk about their approach to Aram, which is very, very deeply rooted. And it's one of the things that I noticed, Roo, is what after I'd written it, I was working with my friend, producer, and access worker, Gurdeep Sian, and he had seen some of your work, and he mentioned that you need to get Roo. Roo's work is all about Aram, so I was really excited to talk to you. So Roo, if you can give us a little flavour of your practice and how rest fits within that, please.
Yeah, so I say I have two strands of my practice. I have like an inside practice and an outside strand. So my inside practice is when I look inward and I make on my own and I spend time with myself. So whether that's doing like performance or in this case, like we're going to talk about weaving, and that's just when I'm with myself. And then my outside practice is taking what I made internally and sharing it with people, activating it socially, allowing people to use it, or you know, just putting it into the public realm. And the reason I make a distinct separation between the two is because of this thing that we're talking about right now, which is aram, which is to rest. So as an artist who has disability, and the reason I phrase it like that is because, you know, I'm already a British Asian woman. Lots of the time people reduce my work to just being about British Asian ideas. The moment that I put disability in the mix, people will assume that my work is just about disability, and I don't like those ideas of like reducing things when they are so complex. Like as a fellow South Asian, you'll know like the things that are in our culture, or the things that we make, or the things that we look to, have so many multiple meanings. So it's really like difficult to see them being reduced to like certain simple tropes. So I kind of want to open up like the complexity and stuff of certain work, I guess, today with you. But yeah, so I have two strands: inside, being on my own with something, and outside, activating it with people.
Fantastic. And how does rest kind of feature within the work? I mean, lots of people rest in different ways. Some people rest, for some people, rest becomes this kind of cogitative process where they're digesting all of the things, and then when they rest, they actually start to make connections. For other people, it's just a way of shutting the world out, and it's almost like cleansing themselves of what they've been doing. So how would rest kind of feature within your process, your practice?
I guess for me, it's like rest isn't one thing. Like in the same way, like that culture and my work is really complex, rest is also really complex. And like I've been told numerous times by people, oh, you should do less, or you shouldn't be doing so much, you need to rest. Like thinking that I have a need to be productive when it's not so much about that. So because I have different strands within my practice, where sometimes I'm on my own or sometimes I'm with public, I'm able to get rest in different ways. So when I'm on my own and making, I really enjoy making, and making is a form of rest for me, even though it is my practice, and even though that's how I make money, or that's how I make a living, it is a form of rest for me, and I haven't fallen out of love with it yet. But yeah, the things that I do, the weaving and the kind of like repetitive processes, or because I work with my hands a lot, like I'd say it's like artisan. Like they have this saying in Punjab about like how people are linked by their hands, and how this is like a really important process that's passed down from generations and ancestors. So because I make with my hands, I find that really restful. I also find rest in being with community, but there's double-edged sides of both of those things. So sometimes making lots can also put me out of touch with like the real world, and then I'll need rest from making. And then also being too with the public and being too social and seeing too many people can also mean that I need some rest. So that rest can then take, like you said, more cogitative forms of just lying down and doing nothing, or going for a walk, or being with family, or being with friends. But like rest doesn't look like one thing for me. And I guess in the practice, it takes many different shapes, many different forms, many different ways of arriving. And it is like a common thread amongst Seva, which is selfless service, and Sangat, which is community. Seva, Sangat, and Aram are three threads in my practice. And I guess today we're focusing on Aram. But yeah, the three exist together because Seva is doing, Sangat is community. And then Aram becomes this thing that like neatly is threaded into all of it, I suppose. And I don't always get it right. It's a practice that you just, I think, is ongoing for life. Like I'm not trying to preach on how to be restful either.
Yeah. Let's talk about briefly, if we can, Sangat and Seva. Yeah. So Seva is selfless giving, which can also manifest as a form of rest as well. So yeah, I mean, if you could just expand on that a little for us.
Yeah, I guess like all of these terms come from like Sikh Dharam, so I'm Sikh, but actually they're probably quite pertinent to many cultures and many different religions and many different people and folk. But so selfless service is the act of doing something for others, or for something that is outside of yourself. And I have like an interesting relationship with that. So it's like doing acts of service, whether that's like, I don't know, like making tea for people in public. Like I do that as a form of practice sometimes, like go out and give tea, or cook for people, or eat with people, or listen to people while they tell stories. Cleaning is a form of selfless service, whether that's cleaning your own home, cleaning in a temple, or cleaning in the studio. Like these kinds of acts of service that are beyond yourself, for a higher purpose, for others, or for some bigger reason. And then Sangat is community. So and I don't mind this being on tape, it's quite a public fact, but I'm emancipated from family. And I guess because of the lack of that, I have the desire and the need to form like a chosen family with community members. So whether that's community within art, community within like peers who are shared heritage, or community through like making, I think community is a really big form of rest too. So because being with people is resting in a way that you're kind of like outside of yourself for a bit. You're being with it's really hard to explain in the English language, because these terms, as you know, have such big importance in our own language, and then to like kind of translate them, it's hard to do, especially when the West is like so anti-community at the moment and things like that. But yeah, I guess it's about like being with folk and doing restorative things together, whether that's cooking with community, eating with community, just being in community. It really takes you outside of your head.
Yeah, it reminds me of this idea of sharing, and how sharing becomes a form of rest as well. When you share something, it's like you're halving your burden. And you know, that really kind of resonates in terms of this broader theme of Aram. But if we can kind of move on to the making, I can remember like previous conversations we've had. You spoke about the process of making these, and I wanted to kind of get an insight into how you made the manjis and that process and the people that you interacted with as well.
So the first ever manji I made in lockdown in 2020, but I'd been dreaming of making one for a really long time. And so yeah, I used to work for a supermarket called Lidl, and I was there for a long time, and I got really ill and had to leave. Anyway, when I left, I realized like how much I wanted to make so badly. And one of the first things I wanted to make was a manji, just because I grew up in Punjab, and I had this, like, some of my best memories are like lying on the manji in the sun on like rooftops or under stars, or like with my grandma's chunni over my head, like basking in the sun. Like, I think when you speak to lots of South Asian people, they'll have a fond memory of a manji or a khatia or a cot or a charpai, or whatever word or term you want to use. And so, yeah, I kind of set myself this task of making one, of understanding the process. And I think what's really important is that it is like super DIY. I taught myself, I watched loads of YouTube videos, but I remember like the process being like so meditative, because you get caught in this one act. And I used to start like early in the morning, and then finish at night, and sometimes forget to eat, which is, I don't advise, that's not restful. But the point is, like, when you meditate, you reach like a higher plane or a higher state of mind where like even food evades you. So again, I'm not trying to glamorize not eating, but it was this like state of being that was like so beyond anything I'd ever experienced, just like this weaving continuously, and even the carving of the wood, and like taking pieces away, like you feel it with your body, and then your mind kind of like gets like embodied or fixed into the material. Once I realized that the process was so meditative, I started to think about ways in which that I could meditate upon words or ideas or phrases. So I chose Sangat Seva and Aram, which is woven into 3 manjis, and that's more recent work. And with those, the kind of process became about like meditating on each single word as I was going along, and really kind of trying to understand the crux of them. And I think it's it's an ongoing practice, but yeah, it was a really strong connection to that. I mean, I could go on talking for hours about like all of our connections. Those are my personal connections. When I made my first ever manji, I was made aware of like connections that were beyond me. So I have to admit, like, the manji or the charpai, it's not something that belongs to me. It's not my concept. Like, it's everyone's. It's an object that belongs to everyone. Anyone can make one, and anyone can have an attachment to it. When I was making mine, I lived in a flat that had like the similar cladding to Grenfell Tower, and so we had fire marshals patrolling 24 hours a day to like ensure the safety before they fixed it. And I was making in my front, like, because it's like a big apartment block, I had like a front area just outside, because I was on lower ground floor. And the fire marshals used to stop every day and kind of watch for a bit. And then on the last day when I made it, they came up to me and told me that it reminded them of their granddad. And at first I was a bit surprised, but then when he started to explain, they were from Sudan, and they spoke about like their village and memories of their granddad weaving them, and like he was like talking about the process, and then talking about being a kid and jumping on them, and he was just so happy and he wanted to sit on it. And I managed to get a picture of him and his friend sitting on it together, and it was just really beautiful of a moment. And I think that's when the inside and outside practice formed, because for all of these days and weeks I'd been on my own with this object, really pouring into it. And then suddenly I came out of myself to be with these 2 people in this public space, and saw that it wasn't just about me, it was about them as well, and so many other people. And I guess that's where all these threads keep coming back together and realizing themselves.
I was interested to learn a little bit more about kind of where this goes now, where you'd like to take it, if you're able to talk about some of the ideas, and just more broadly around um, you know, some of the performative practice and other areas that you work as well. There was a lot of kind of community focused practice as well. So if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've got like a couple of like things that I like to think about with these. It's really important that these mungies are seen as objects. Like I said, they don't belong to me, they belong to everyone. I want to see them being used. So like when they go into gallery spaces, I make sure that people can sit on them. So the invigilator staff like encourage folk to sit on them, to rest on them, to lie on them. Like how often is it that you go to an art space and you got somewhere to lie down in the middle of a show, or somewhere to sit down for that matter? And it's like there's a thing with that actually. So I'll just quickly go on to that before I go on to the rest of the ideas. Like initially, like I opened them up to the public, and then some like people would like jump on them, and I was like, no, all my hard work. So I had to draw boundaries around that. So there's this idea of making something open to everyone, but then realizing actually it does affect you. You know, I guess that it draws parallels with like mental health and physical health. And, you know, if you allow really porous boundaries, then, you know, it can really take away from that process. So I had to like draw some soft rules around it. Like if you're going to sit on them and lie on them, take your shoes off. Like, you know, respecting that object of rest as well. So that's just a tangent note, sorry about that. But yeah, the point is I want everyone to be able to engage with them, and that's the value of them. So I guess that questions like stuff in art, because a lot of the time you're not allowed to touch art, you're not allowed to sit on it, you're not allowed to like lie on it and things like that. But I guess the value is in allowing people to have a moment of rest and to appreciate the object. And then outside of galleries, because I don't just want them to be a gallery object, they're a public object, a community object. So it's about making sure they go back into community spaces, and that communities are able to access them and use them and appreciate them. So like I often take them to places like in Birmingham, there's a place called Civic Square, and they do like lunches and food and community gatherings, and like they talk about really important neighborhood issues. And the people there like represent like our community, I suppose, like POC community, and to see them being used there is really important. And then I've also taken them to Soho Road. Like every city has one road, right? Or Desi Road. I mean, Leicester has like Narborough Road and a couple of others. East Park Road.
Belgrade. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the
exactly.
whole of Leicester, you could probably say.
And in Birmingham we've got like Ladypool Road, Allen Rock Road, Soho Road, and like so these are places like, you know, grown up going to get your Desi supplies. And so it's like, how do I get these to be like your park bench in this area? So I took them down to Soho Road, and first I thought I'm just going to be walking around with them and nobody's really going to want to stop. And then suddenly this uncle stopped me and was just like, oh, did you make this, Betty? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh my God. And then he phoned his brother, he phoned his daughter, he phoned his wife, and he was like, everyone get down here now. And 20 people gathering around my mungies, like lying on them, taking selfies on them, doing TikToks and stuff like that. It was mad. And it was like all within the space of like 10 minutes of just walking around with this mungie, because I quite like to carry around. And I just remember the feeling of like being reunited with like this community and everyone getting really excited. I mean, he did try to turn it into a business and asked me whether like I knew a carpenter, and like was like, how many can you make me by next week? Which is like, no, uncle, this is a slow process. But it, you know, seeing that joy around them. And I think one of the guys, his name was Bagal, I made friends with them all afterwards, but he said, I haven't sat on one of these in 6 years. And he was like, Bin Diyad Al Gaya, which means memories of the village have come back. So just by seeing this one object, all that memory gets attached to it.
Yeah, and this is a theme that keeps coming back in terms of the memory, and when you undo it's like a ribbon that's
Yeah.
woven in. When you undo that ribbon, it's so long, and it reminds me of this idea of memory, and everyone that comes into contact with this remembers their memory of resting. And it's only what we tend to do as human beings, we tend to kind of hold very dear those moments that are positive, and usually those moments of that are positive are moments of rest.
Oh my God, yes.
And there's so much in this. It's so so rich, you know, and fantastic work.
Thank you.
Gosh, you know, I want to
Sorry.
keep talking,
I'm
but
taking your
yeah,
breath away, Ashok.
yeah, literally, but fantastic work. Well, thanks for speaking to us, and all the best for the future, Roo. I hope to see the Manjis, you know, in person soon. So please tell us, you know, when they're being exhibited. They're at Blue Coat at the moment, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, they're at Blue Coat until January, and then they're going to go elsewhere after that. So I guess they'll send some updates out later next year. But yeah, they're at Blue Coat until January. So
yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for giving me time to talk about it. It's really important to reflect on things, and it's nice to be able to talk about them out loud, to remember why I do it and yeah, how it makes me feel. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.